at Mass this past weekend, I had a sense that everyone was tired, myself included, just kind of looking out in the congregation, and everyone was kind of, fighting to stay awake, or just kind of got that sense that everyone was kind of dragging a little bit, again, myself included. And a few days later, I was at a priest's mother's funeral, and all of the priests from the Archdiocese try to go to those funerals for parents of priests if we can. And so I was there. There was about 70 priests there, and not one of them would I have described as being completely alert. There was a lot of them there, but we were all kind of dragging a little bit, if you will, along with everyone else. And I think it's one of those things that we all probably experience, and I think what we take away from that is that keeping Christmas alive in our hearts is hard. Everybody on December 25th and after midnight Mass on the 24th and so on and so forth, everyone is very happy. And that's a very beautiful thing. Even the most staunch atheist, a lot of times they sense that something significant is taking place, and there's that sense of peace that lasts throughout the day and in the days that follow. But what we find is that after we go to our parties and go to Mass and celebrate spiritually and also as human beings, as we do that, we find that we start to get tired. And so on the 28th and the 29th, it's a little bit harder to not cut off someone on the interstate, or to utter some sort of choice words under our breath, maybe at a friend or a brother or a spouse or whatever it may be. Keeping Christmas is hard. I think that's the takeaway from that in the days that follow. And this is the 8th day of Christmas. As we know, we celebrate, through the Epiphany and even through the baptism of the Lord, and some up through even February 2nd, where Christ is presented in the temple. But anyways, we have this idea. So whereas most of the world has put their Christmas trees out on the December 26th and has moved on and is ready for Valentine's Day, we Catholics keep Christmas. We keep it going. We keep remembering the celebration. We're supposed to. But it gets tiring, and we get tired. And we're probably a little bit tired today. But the challenge is again laid to us to keep Christmas. And I think that Charles Dickens wrote about that in the Christmas Carol, his famous story about Christmas. And he talks about at the very end of the book, he talks about and he describes the new and improved Scrooge. And he says that, Dickens says about Scrooge, it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. It was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. And again, the implication there from Charles Dickens is that it's been hard for a long time, for many, many centuries, probably since the beginning, to keep Christmas going. And we're here and we're like, it seems like, gosh, weren't we just at Mass? And our clothes all smell like incense. I think everything I own now smells like incense. And we see the incense come out again and we're like, not again. It's hard. Keeping Christmas is hard. And so the question then, what does that have to do with today? Today we celebrate a solemnity dealing with Mary, the Mother of God. And so what does that have to do with keeping Christmas? And I think in order to look at that, we first need to look at Mary's opponent. Mary's opponent, the devil. And I think if we look at what the devil does, we learn something. The devil doesn't try to get us to hate God as he really is, because that's impossible. We can't hate the person who made us and wants nothing more than for us to be happy for all eternity and to be at peace in our life, which is what God really is and who God really is. So the devil knows it's impossible to get us to hate that God as he really is. Who would hate that? Well, I don't really like this person. They want everything. They want the best for me. No one says that. And so the devil knows that he cannot get us to hate God as he really is. So the trick for the devil is to get us to not understand who God is and to misunderstand God, and thus we will hate the misunderstanding that we have. So the people who didn't come to Mass for this holy day and who aren't Catholic or aren't even Christian, those people, they don't hate the church and they don't hate God. They hate what they think the church is, and they hate who they think God is. They view God as this person who's like there to destroy them and take away all of the things that they like in their life and all of the things that make them happy, and that God has come and Christ has come to make them miserable. And then in the same way, Christ's church that he left behind on earth is the same way. The church exists to take people's money, to make them miserable, to make them feel really bad about themselves, and to be oppressed. Now that understanding of God and that understanding of the church, people can and do hate. But it's not who God is, and it's not what the church that he left us is. So the devil wants us to see God wrongly, wants us to see the church wrongly, and he wants us to see Christ wrongly. And so the best way to do that, the best way to get us to not keep Christmas in our hearts, the best way to hate God and to hate what we think God is to forget about the manger, to forget about Christ the child. If we can forget about Christ the child, I think that's why, if remembering that Christ becomes a child is exactly why everyone is happy on December 25th. It's why everyone celebrates Christmas. The idea that God is a child is something that everyone falls in love with, and rightly so, because it's amazing and humble and a loving gesture by God, love beyond even sometimes comprehension. Everyone's happy on December 25th because we celebrate God becoming a kid, a baby. Who hates babies? No one. So if the devil is going to get us to have the wrong idea of God and to hate Christ, then he has to get us to forget about this as quickly as possible. And so by December 28th and December 29th, we can start to forget about the manger, and thus we can start to be mean people again and bad people again and be miserable again. And the devil's plan kicks back into full gear. Now, what does that have to do with today's celebration? I think that for the first time in my life, it clicked for me this year about what we're doing here today, what this particular solemnity is today. This is not Mary rising into heaven and being assumed into heaven, this glorious thing that happens that we celebrate August 15th. It's not her coronation as the queen of heaven and earth. It's the celebration of Mary, Jesus' mom. The motherhood of Mary is exactly what we call today's celebration. Jesus' mom. Now, why is that important? Because maybe you've seen The Passion of the Christ, the movie by Mel Gibson, and there's the beautiful artistic thing that he does in that film where when Jesus is being tortured and crucified, Mary has flashbacks to Jesus the child. So when Jesus falls the third time in the Passion of the Christ, Mary has a flashback to when Jesus was a little baby boy, first learning to walk, and he falls down. And Mary runs to him, as any mother would. Mary remembers and understands and remembers the times where Jesus, the newborn child, spoke his first words, called her mama, and then mommy, and then mom. Mary remembers those, and we hear about that in today's gospel. A very, very, very important line for us as Catholics. At the end of the Christmas story, and the shepherds have gone home and have started spreading the news, it says that Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. Mary remembers all the stories, and what mother doesn't? It could be the most staunch or the most horrendous and horrible criminal, and his mother would be there most likely 99.9% of the time begging for forgiveness and clemency from the judge. A mother remembers a child like no one else. And that's exactly what the Gospels tell us. Mary kept all these things, all of them, reflecting on them in her heart, her whole life, as every mother does. And that's why we celebrate her motherhood today, the Mother of God. And why is that important? Because she will help us understand and fight against the false visions of Christ by giving us the real understanding of who Christ is. When we start to buy into the devil's vision of Christ for us as this mean person who's here to ruin our lives and make us miserable and take everything that we like away from us, Mary will help us understand, no, you've forgotten. My son was a baby. He was a child. Mary helps us keep Christmas all year round, if we let her. And that's why John Paul II talks about Mary as being a school of prayer. Mary, he says we have to continue to go to the school of Mary. And what do we learn at Mary University? We're reminded and we continue to relearn who Christ really is. Not the destroyer, not the person who will ruin our lives, but the person who wants nothing more for us than to be happy. Keeping Christmas all year round is hard. And the devil gives us the wrong idea about Christ, thus making it really easy to stop keeping Christmas. Mary, Christ's mommy, will continue to help us understand who Christ really is. When we pray the mysteries of the Rosary, we are given again images of Christ throughout his life. She will help us keep Christmas all year round. We simply have to let her help us.